Hello, we're back again, and I'm Ed Figueroa, and my wife name is Gina Figueroa, and we're the Rivers of Living Water Ministry. Thank you for coming back. We've been talking about the topic of one shot, and I'm going to go directly into 1 Samuel. So I know earlier I got sidetracked, but I felt it was important to bring those points up, because after all, this is your walk with God, and we just want to encourage you, and we hope that this is really been helpful. Okay. As I said earlier, verse 1, Saul's been anointed to be king over Israel. Verse 2, the Lord remembers what Amalek did to Israel. And then verse 3, Saul is given instructions. And verse 4, Saul gathers the people together to go ahead and do the task. And verse 5, they lay wait for Amalek. Verse 6, he sends a warning to the Kenites, which were the descendants of Jethro, which was the father-in-law of Moses. And he tells them to leave because it's going to destroy Amalek, which I thought it was very noble of Saul, because he remembered their kindness, so he must have recollected some history, have a historical knowledge of the Kenites. And then the Kenites leave, and in verse 7, he smokes at the Amalekites. Verse 8, they slay all the people with the edge of the sword. Verse 9, Saul and his people spare Agag and the best of the sheep, and oxen, and fatlings, and lambs. Verse 10, then the Lord speaks to Samuel. Here's the sad part. This is the most saddest part that the Lord expresses. And I'm going to read it. It repented me that I have set up Saul to be king, for he has turned back from following me, and had not performed my commandments. And it grieved Samuel, and he cried unto the Lord all night. Now that word repent it's not the same word that it refers to us, for us to turn around and stop sinning. The word repenter has a different connotation, which means basically to be sorry that he did this, that he now has to change his direction of selecting another person. We know that other person was David, the son of Jesse. But I want to say, in selecting David as king, it was no piece of cake, because it was a while before King David was anointed. And to just say a couple of things, King David was a beautiful man. He was one of God's men, but he too had flaws in his life, as you can probably attest to in your readings of King David. But getting back to the word, we need to understand how important it is for God to select you or choose you for the task. It is so important to be obedient. That's the key. You know, we think in terms of I've sacrificed, I tithe here, I helped over here, I do this over here. But let me tell you something. Obedience is better than sacrifice. And I'll bring that out as I'm explaining a little bit more detail of the conversation between Samuel and Saul. Okay? I'm going to read here. Verse 13, Samuel came to Saul. Saul said unto him, Blessed be thou of the Lord. I have performed the commandments of the Lord. Verse 14, Saul said, What meaneth then this bleating of sheep in my ears, and the lowing of the oxen which I hear? Saul says, man, I've done everything that the Lord wants me to do. He lied. Because Samuel had to ask him the question. See, what I think the key is, really, when Samuel spoke to Saul, it's almost to say, what do you mean you did everything the Lord commanded you? What is this bleating? What is this lamb? What are these lambs doing here, these oxen? You were supposed to slaughter them. And we go to 15, and Saul said, they have brought them from the Amalekites, for the people spared the best of the sheep and of the oxen to sacrifice unto the Lord thy God, and the rest we have utterly destroyed. It sounds like Adam all over again. It was this woman that you gave me. And Eve turned and said, it was Satan. It was the blame game. See, King Saul didn't take up his responsibility of being the king because he blamed the people. It's a blame game. And we Christians are so guilty of it. We need to take responsibility and suffer the consequences of our decisions. And I know that sounds harsh, but you've got to understand that God doesn't just call an ordinary Christian. He calls those Christians that are totally devoted. He sees your heart. You can't fool him. He knows everything. Anyway, let me go back. Verse 16, then Samuel said unto Saul, stay, and I will tell thee what the Lord hath said to me this night. And he said unto him, say on. Verse 17, Samuel said, when thou wast little in thy own sight, wast thou not made the head of the tribes of Israel, and the Lord anointed thee king over Israel? Verse 18, and the Lord sent thee on a journey and said, go and utterly destroy the sinners from the sinners, the Amalekites, and fight against them until that they be consumed. Verse 19, wherefore then didst thou not obey the voice of the Lord, but didst fly upon the spoil, and didst evil in the sight of the Lord? Yes. And again, he says in verse 19, and verse 20, Saul said unto Samuel, oh yeah, I have obeyed the voice of the Lord, and have gone the way which the Lord sent me, and have brought Agag and the king of Amalek, and have utterly destroyed the Amalekites. Don't make no sense. The initial instruction, if I go back, was, and I'm going to pull out with this here, and we'll come back. Verse 3, now go and smite Amalek, and utterly destroy all that they have, and spare them not, but slay both man, women, infant, suckling, ox, sheep, camel, and donkeys. We see the disobedience. But I'm going to close out, and I'll come right back and try to finish it up. I hope this, again, is interesting, so we're going to let you go. Thank you.